Hello, my name is Paul, and this video is called Level Up Your SwiftUI. And the goal here is to help you take a series of incremental steps improving your code from older SwiftUI code up to newer, better SwiftUI code. Now, you might have seen this year, Apple very gently tweaked the SwiftUI logo, old on the left and new on the right. I think this happened because they also introduced Swift Data. And we put these two logos alongside the classic Swift logo. I call these three together the bird logos. If you think about it, last year they added Swift Charts. Swift Charts did not get a bird logo. I think that's intentional. I think Apple's giving us a signal here. What we're seeing is the new Cocoa. Because in the old way of building apps with Objective-C, you'd use Foundation for all your standard library stuff. You'd use AppKit for all your UI stuff. And you'd use Core Data for your data storage and management. And now we have Swift, standard library, we have SwiftUI, and we have Swift Data. This is the new Cocoa. Anyway, this talk is focusing just on the SwiftUI part. There's no Swift Data here, no observation and similar, just pure SwiftUI code. And you'll see a whole bunch of things that are new in iOS 17. Some things will work back to iOS 16. A handful of things will work back to iOS 15, some even back to iOS 14, and believe it or not, some even back to iOS 13. Anyway, let's begin. This year, I had a vacation in Japan, where I saw a whole bunch of very old things, and a whole bunch of very new things, indulged in all sorts of culture, and of course, ate lots and lots of food. And if I were normal, I would stop there and enjoy Japan, have a great time. But we're developers. So what we're going to do? We're going to build an app about our experiences. In our case, I made a Japan 2023 application here. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of foods I can just swipe through to see things I liked in Japan. And I can go vertically for drinks, and then go further and see activities, things I did in Japan. The app also has a search feature, so I can look for something simple like Shin, and it'll find Yoshinoya. And there's like button to say, yes, I've done this thing. I can track how often I had Yoshinoya food or rode on Shinkansen. This I did a lot, so I pressed done a lot of times on that. I like that one a lot. And that's the whole project. It's very, very simple intentionally. It's not designed to be complex. It's a little sandbox for our new features. Now, you know, looking at this is a very simple app behind the scenes. We're looking at a whole bunch of views spreading off the screen horizontally, and the same thing stamped vertically for various categories. And as users swipe between things, we just move them along, one place at a time, every time. But what happens if the user goes back partway? They haven't scrolled all the way. This is a very weird place to be. You can't really see anything useful on the screen. And you can see this in our app. Here, if I just swipe around various things, I can say, that's neat, but let's just stop here. Or worse, stop horizontally and then also vertically stop part way. So the app's in a really useless state. You can't see anything fully on the screen. This is now resolvable with iOS 17. There's an all new modifier for scroll views called a scroll target behavior. We can say paging, which means as the user swipes, move one whole screen of content at a time. Or we can say view aligned, which means scroll between various views I tell you, snapping to each one individually rather than a whole page. And how do we say which views to snap to? Simple. We can say scroll target layout to a whole container like a H stack or a V stack, and it'll snap to individual children inside that view there. Really simple, it's really nice. Here's our code. You'll see this is our main listing view. We've got this big list of content, vertical content going down the screen. Inside there, we loop over all our categories, so food, drinks, activities. Inside there, we read out all the items for that particular activity, and we're going to show that each one in its own scroll view, stretching out horizontally. And in that scroll view, we have the H stack of contents stretching out for all the foods or all the drinks. And there, we loop over each thing with an item view, showing each item on the screen. So it was, we had arcades, we had gacha machines and similar. There's also some padding for that inner H stack, so items don't go edge to edge on the screen. Leave a little bit of space there. Now, we're going to upgrade this for iOS 17. We'll start adding that new modifier to the scroll view, saying the scroll target behavior of view aligned. Snap to the children inside the scroll view that I tell you to snap to. Right now, that's nothing at all, but we'll tell this H stack inside the scroll view, I want you to snap to every child inside you. Every item view should be snapped to as we page around the scroll view. It's just 2 lines of code, 2 new modifiers for our SwiftUI code, but the result is quite brilliant. Back in our code over here, I can now swipe between various views, and you'll see that all snap to individual items in the foods one at a time all the way through. If I try and go back part way and let go, boom, it snaps to the nearest view afterwards. In this case, Ekiben. I love Ekiben. Wow, Japan. Anyway, it's a big improvement, but it's far from perfect. Look at this, for example. We're seeing that white space on the left-hand side. It's not really a good thing. We wanted spacing before so it wouldn't go edge to edge and I wouldn't overflow everywhere, but now it looks broken. This is triggered by that padding modifier from earlier. Add a bit of spacing was good, but now adds a hard white line on either side. It's not ideal. So, padding, as you'll know, if you have a long scroll view of content and apply padding to that content, it will bring in from the leading and trailing edge of that content. So here I'm saying padding horizontal 20. It'll bring in the leading and trailing edge by 20 inside the scroll view. If we had 40, it'll bring it even further. That works fine for simple padding. We don't want that here. Instead, we're going to use a new iOS 17 modifier, which is content margins. This changes the safe area inset for the scroll view. So things scrolling inside there scroll in a smaller space. Here's 20 or 40 like that. And this works really, really well. So we use that same thing in our code. Right now we have this hard-coding padding of horizontal 20. We don't want that anymore. We'll remove that modifier and instead say that our scroll view has that new content margins modifier. Using, again, 20, same value, specifying the content of the scroll view. Bring in its safe area by some number. And critically, I move the list row insets to be the last modifier for this view. Always say there are no further insets after the ones I've told you about. It's a small change, adding another modifier, removing one other modifier, but it works so well. Back in our code again, I can now swipe between these various foodstuffs. As you can see, they go edge to edge now, much more cleanly. But it's still not quite perfect. As you can see, if I bring up this particular view here, look at the leading and trailing edges. They're not equal. They're both visible, great. Edge to edge, great. Not equal, we can do better. Again, another new iOS 17 modifier called container relative frame. Let us say this child view should get its sized based on its parent size. In this case, we're saying get my horizontal size based on my container's horizontal size. And we're given a size and axis in, saying, okay, here's the parent size, how big should the child be? We might say, for example, the child should be 0.5, the size of the parent, so half the width of the parent view. Or perhaps 0.333, be a third the width of its parent view. There's a more advanced alternative here, which is axis, a count, a span, and spacing. And this is saying, I want you to divide my parent view into 5 equal width columns. And then make each child view inside there be 2 of those 5 columns. Span 2 of count 5. Or perhaps you want to say, I want to span 4 of count 5. It's down to you. It's very flexible. But best of all, the simplest version of container relative frame is trivial. Just give it an axis. And this version means I want you to match the full width of my container, subtracting any safe area insets. And that's perfect here, because we just use content margins to adjust the safe area insets of the horizontal scroll views. So now in our code, we have this item view showing one item in our layout. I can right click on that and choose jump to definition, and then scroll all the way down this layout of one view in food or drink or whatever, and find this, a fixed frame width, always be 320 wide. That might work earlier, but now we want something better. We want a flexible size according to the parent view we're attached to. So I'm going to remove that frame and apply the new iOS 17 modifier, which is container relative frame. I'll say match the container's size horizontally. Another one-line change, very, very simple, but the result is quite brilliant. You get this, our new layout. As we scroll around from view to view to view, you'll get equal matching before and after, equal size information inside there. This is basically the classic App Store layout of scroll hinting, showing you what comes before and what comes after, so you know there are things to scroll through visually. It's so nice and so easy to do. And now we have really smart scrolling in our app. We used a scroll target behavior saying view aligned, snap to the views I tell you to snap to. And we say what you snap to by saying you're a scroll target layout. Snap to all these views in the H stack. We then applied content margins, bringing in the safe area inset for a scroll view. And finally we said, also I want you to apply the container relative frame horizontal so the child views match the full width of the scroll view minus that safe area inset. Now, all these require iOS 17, so there's a good chance of thinking, wait a minute, I can't use these for some time. I've got to support 16 or perhaps 15. So let's go back and look at some slightly older code you can use in your project that's still very valuable. For example, here in this item view file here, on line 51, you can see we have a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of 25. Now, how many times have you written code like that? Almost certainly lots and lots. New. From Xcode 15 and onwards, we can now just say clipshape.rect corner radius 25 and get exactly the same result. A rounded rect of 25 point rounding. And brilliantly, this works back to iOS 13. And this happens because in Xcode 15's SwiftUI interface file is this code right here. It's saying to us there's a new method available in iOS 13 onwards. It's called rect with corner radius and style, but internally it calls down to the older initializer for rounded rectangles with a corner radius and style. But critically, it's marked always emit into client. Copy this code into your build at compile time, which is why it works back to iOS 13, as long as you have Xcode 15 or later. By the way, just briefly I want to say, if I go back to the .rect again and say what other options are there, you'll see .rect has a new option here, .rect corner radii. And this thing produces an uneven rounded rectangle where you can say, like, round these two corners, but keep these two straight. It's full control for the rounding of corners, and that works back to iOS 16. Anyway, we don't want that here, and so I'm going to undo that change, and we'll leave it back as we had it. And instead, let's try something else instead. We're going to say, what else can we do? And over in our search area, there's another brilliant convenience code we can look at. For buttons this time. Buttons, you'll see we have two so far in our project, very, very simple project. We have one here in our button item view that you can press to like a thing. So add one activity for Shinkansen or Yoshinoya or whatever. And there's a second button over here in our main listing view that handles erasing all our data. Now you'll know, classic iOS 13 SwiftUI code, we could say here's a button title with an action to run when it's tapped. Then in iOS 14, they added a label view, so we could say, as a trading closure, show some text and an image in our button, and adapt correctly based on the system you're running on right now. But there's a new option here without a trading closure. We can now specify a title and image and action straight in the button initializer. And this works back to iOS 14. Again, you have to have Xcode 15 or later to use this, but it backports beautifully back to iOS 14. So we can simplify our two pieces of button code with this new initializer. Back in our project, here's our erasing code right now. You can see we have this label erase data and system image. I'm going to select that piece of code here and Command X that to my clipboard. Then paste it into the button initializer and simply delete the trailing closure. It's no longer needed. Similarly, for the other button code here, we have the same thing again. We have this call data model count for item with system image attached to it. And so again, I'll select that text, Command X to my clipboard, get it out of there, and then remove trailing closure and paste it into the button initializer directly. Much simpler code. So, convenience ways to make rounded rects, as circles, capsules, and much more, plus nicer ways to make buttons. And of course, neither of those actually change the way our app actually looks. It looks the same way no matter what. So let's look at some changes that affect the way our apps actually look at runtime. Starting with a search. In the app, if I search for Miss, we'll find Mr. Donut. But it says one foods. And clearly, that's not ideal. We can do better than that. Now, you'll know that English is very irregular about how it handles plural forms. We could say there is one drink and two drinks. Simple. Add an S. Easy peasy. But then it's one person, but two people. Or we could say, I want to have one mouse and two mice. And my personal favorite, I want to have one sheep and two sheep. And it gets particularly weird when you factor in that we have zero using plural as well. 0 drinks, 0 people, plural, despite there being none of a thing attached to it. This is clearly absolutely infuriating for folks trying to translate all this text. And so you get people writing code that's quite lazy. For example, if you have two integers, 1 and 5, you'd say num1 drinks with the S being in parentheses. And that way 1 or 5 both look the same. 1 drinks or 5 drinks, they look the same no matter what. And people pluralize in their head. Now helpfully, this kind of code isn't required anymore. Instead, we can ask SwiftUI to pluralize it automatically. Take the integer, say drink, and inflect true for any number. And we'll use drink both times as singular. We don't care anymore. Because SwiftUI will automatically make it plural. It will say 1 drink, or 5 drinks, or 0 drinks, or 500 drinks automatically. And this is really easy to adopt in your project. In our case, we can go over to our Xcode project. We can load up the JSON file that powers all our data. And you'll see here on line 3, it says foods. I don't care about plural or singular anymore. I'm going to say food. Across the board, singular. Similarly, I can scroll down and find where it says drinks down here and say, just use drink always. Stay singular. And at the bottom, activities becomes activity. Everywhere, singular. So our data is now simpler. And now we can go over to our listing view file and find where those strings are used. And it's up here in the section header. You can see that a text view being shown, and it calls inside there data model.title for some category. What we're going to do is we're going to right click on that title for method and jump to the definition. Show me that code. And there it is. We're saying items count, category ID. So 0 foods, 1 foods, 3 activities, 0 activities, whatever it is. The pluralization isn't happening here. But notice how I marked this method as returning a localized string key. SwiftUI knows how to localize these things for us. And so we can upgrade to the new automatic pluralization. I'll change this code to say I'll take this whole string and make it inflected automatically. Again, a tiny one-line change, not even a one-line change, like a half-line change right now. But the result is quite brilliant. When our project runs again, you'll see I'll do another search. Up here, we can look for, again, Shin. And you'll see we have 1 food, 0 drinks, 1 activity. It's correctly pluralizing everything inside there for us. This is done by an underlying foundation system called automatic grammar agreement. This was introduced a few iOS versions ago, iOS 15, for English and Spanish. But they've added to it since then. They've said in iOS 16 will add French, Italian, and Brazilian Portuguese, and in iOS 17 they've added European Portuguese and German. So we get a whole bunch of common European languages available automatically inflected in our code with no extra work from us. It's really, really nice. Now, of course, my app is about Japan. So you might think, well, how does it work with Japanese? And the answer is Japanese is a much, much simpler language with no complex plurals. It just out of the box works as a language. Anyway, let's look at some view layout changes too. If I scroll through my various types of food, you'll see they're not all exactly the same size. Here, for example, is milk roll. It's a 1-line description, and so if I scroll back and hold it slightly, you'll see it's slightly shorter than the smoothies next to it. It doesn't look great. Now, this kind of discrepancy happens because I've just said, show the item description in some text. Classic iOS 13 SwiftUI code. You'll also know we could say the same thing has a line limit of 2. Grow up to 2 lines but no further. Again, classic iOS 13 code. But from iOS 16 and later, we can now say there's a line limit range. No less than 2, no more than 5. Or we can also say, I want exactly 2, reserving space for 2. So if it's 1 line or 0 lines, still leave 2 lines of space. So all our things take up exactly the same height. It's a much nicer and more consistent way of showing text. In our project, we're here already in the item view, in our showing one thing in one category. And then if I scroll up to find where this text is, boom, there is in line 30. I can say the line limit here of exactly 2 lines, reserving space. So if it is 1 line, make it 2. If it's 0 lines, make it 2. If it's 5 lines, make it 2. Stick to a consistent size. A small change, again, just 1 line of SwiftUI code here. And yet, back in our project, you'll see the result is quite brilliant. As we swipe through, all our views have exactly the same height. Even when you swipe backwards just a little bit, it still looks exactly the same height, no matter how long the description is. Next up, my all-time favorite SwiftUI feature, which is automatic color gradients. You'll see these things have a blue bar at the bottom. Behind milk roll in white is this blue box to get some contrast there. This is done because inside our item view code here, we're saying behind all the text, I want you to apply here on line 45 a blue background color. Well, if we say .blue.gradient, we'll get the tiniest color gradient. Just a little bit of a lift there, slightly lighter at the top, slightly darker below. It looks fantastic out of the box. Here's the result. Boom, there we go. Just a slight blue gradient. It looks great with hardly any change whatsoever. I particularly like the fact this works across the whole range of SwiftUI built-in colors, plus all your own custom colors too. Speaking of color, you'll know that SwiftUI has SF symbol support built right in, and of course all these work in multicolor. What we're going to do is say a symbol rendering mode of multicolor, and we get lovely multicolor rainbows or sunshine or battery symbols and more. But new in iOS 17 is another fantastic SF symbols modifier called Symbol Effect to add an animation to these symbols. Question is, what goes here? It depends the result you want. For example, you might say, I want to have a variable color animation to make the various waves of my rainbow fade through one at a time, in this case, cumulatively. Or you might say, I want to have a reversing variable color, so it fades all the way up, then all the way down, again and again and again. Or you might say, I want to have a variable color iterative, so only one band of the rainbow expands out with color at any given time. Or perhaps it's variable color and then iterative and reversing. So it goes all the way up, then all the way down, one band at a time. It looks fantastic. You can even say, let's not dim the unused parts of the rainbow, let's hide them entirely. And now what you'll see is we get individual things being visible one at a time, with the dimmed parts of the rainbow being invisible completely. And if you really want to, you can do variable color, iterative, hide and active layers, and reversing. The full effect. I want the whole thing one at a time, fading in, fading out, all the way up, all the way down, again and again and again. It's exactly so much control here, depending on what you want to try and do. Anyway, in our app, we've got a simple dummy loading screen with a little antenna bar being visible. We can find this in the project code over in the loading view. This thing has a symbol right here, antenna, radio waves, left and right, and a nice big font. That's an animatable symbol. So we can say I want to use here that extra new modifier of symbol effect. I'll say .symbol effect, then say I want to use the variable color effect with the iterative mode. Show one piece of the radio waves animating at a time, kind of fading, pulsing up and down again and again and again. A tiny change. And if I artificially delay the loading screen so it lasts longer, you'll see the result is this. The radio waves kind of pulsing out again and again and again infinitely. A tiny, tiny change. Again, just one line of code, but a lovely result. Next up. Right now, if I find something I like, I can say, yeah, I did this thing some number of times. For example, I might say, oh yes, my favorite drink right now is Calpis water. I can press on that thing, yeah, I liked it. And do it again and 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 again, tapping the button repeatedly. And that works. It works okay. Now, you'll know that classic iOS 13 button code, some button title, some action to run behind the scenes. We can also now in iOS 17 apply a button repeat behavior saying enable it here. What will happen is if you press the button, it triggers the action. If you keep pressing it, it triggers it again and again and again and again at increasing speeds automatically. Again, there's one line change here. So in our code, I go from loading view over to our item view and then scroll up to find the button. There it is. That's our button code right there. We want that to have the button repeat behavior enabled. And so I'll say below the button, add .button repeat behavior enabled. And that's it. Another simple one-line improvement to our project. So I run the code again and find something I like a lot, which is everything in Japan, quite frankly, like milk roll. I can just press and hold and watch what happens. It adds one to it, then adds more and more and more, faster and faster and faster until it gets a maximum speed. Just pressing and holding, triggering again and again and again. All done automatically by SwiftUI in a platform sensible way, macOS, iOS, tvOS and similar, automatically. Next up, what happens if we have no results to show when we're searching? Let's find out. I'll go to the search box and I'll search something that isn't there, like books, and there's nothing in there. A big white screen appears. Question is, what should be in there? And the answer is, I don't really know. And for a long time, Apple didn't really know either. If you asked the Mail app for an unknown search, it would say no results found in grey text. If you asked the App Store, it would say no results in a big bold white text, your search term below. If you asked Photos, it would say no results for your search text, try a new search. If you asked the Weather app, get a little icon, no results. If you asked the Files app, it would say check the spelling or try a new search. And if you asked iTunes, you get a huge icon with no results for your search term. So simply, Apple had no standard way of saying, sorry, I didn't get that, try again. But as of iOS 17, there's a new content unavailable view. We can say no results with a custom SF symbol and get a fixed standard layout saying there are no results found. The right font, the right weight, the right icon style, and more. If you want to add an extra line of text, you can do. You can say, please search again, for example, and you'll get that shown below in a smaller, dimmer font. Again, all taken care of for us automatically. And if you want full control, you can say show a custom content available view with my exact image font size and text here, then some text below for description, and then custom actions with a border prominent style. And it will take care of all that for you and make it look correct for the platform it's running on. And best of all, for the simplest case of all, which is the most common case of all, no search results, you just say .search. And SwiftUI will look through your view hierarchy to find the nearest search bar, grab the text out of there user typed, and show it in the UI automatically. It's really, really nice. Now in this app, we have 3 sections: foods, drinks, and activities. So I'm going to show one unavailable view in each one of those categories, so perhaps showing all 3, depending on what the user searched for. So in our code, we're in the item view right now. We're going to go across to the listing view. And then inside here, all the way up here, this is the part of the code where we load the items for the current category based on their search term. What we're going to say is, if that items array happens to be empty after the search has taken place, then we want a custom content unavailable view inside here. There's a whole bunch of ways of making it. I'm going to use title and system image. For the title, I'm going to say, sorry, that no of that thing, no food or similar, matches the search text of whatever they typed into the data model behind the scenes, so their search string. So no food matches that thing. Then for the image, I already have an icon attached to my category, so I can say the image is the category's icon automatically, like so. And then everything else, the old scroll view code, that becomes the else block of our condition. The whole scroll view, all its modifiers, just push it all into the else block. Either show the unavailable view or the content as before. And now when we press run the code, we'll get a much nicer result when we do a bad search. For example, in Japan, I don't want to go to say McDonald's. So if I search for McDonald's, boom. No food matching McDonald's, no drink matching McDonald's, no activity matching McDonald's. With a standard UI across the board. Okay, let's wrap up. You've seen how you can do scroll snapping by saying as a scroll target behavior for the scroll view. It could be whole pages or individual views. We then marked which views to snap to by using scroll target layout. Snap to all the children in this H-stack, for example. Then we saw how to indent scroll content by bringing in the safe area inset for the scroll view by some amount. And then how to use relative sizing. So a child gets its size from the parent container it sits inside. In this case, that takes into account the safe area inset of the container. We saw the new back deployed helper code. We can say .rect, saving literally seconds every day. And how we can do simpler button code with a title, image, and action right there in the initializer without using a trailing closure. We saw the new automatic grammar agreement. 15, 16, and 17 supported, getting better every release with English, Portuguese, French, Italian, German, and Spanish EP figs now being supported. And we saw how to do reservation of text size to say always leave at least, or exactly in this case, 2 lines, even if there's only 1 line of text inside there, to keep a consistent spacing everywhere we went. We saw how to do automatic color gradients, .blue, .gradient. Works for any of the built-in SwiftUI colors and all your own colors too. And we saw how to do the new SF symbol animations by using .variable color, .iterative. We added button repeat behavior so you could press and hold on buttons to trigger again and again and again. Plus, we now show a system standard content unavailable view, so all our UI looks the same across every app on the Apple platforms. Now, this was a fast video with lots of code being shown, of which only some you'll want to use in your project. And that's okay. I've shown you what's possible now. You can go away and say, oh yeah, this bit, yes, these ones, not so much, fine. That's fine. Decide which parts work for you and take those and put them on into your project. And that's fine. Take what works for you. It's an iterative improvement. If you only have one code change from this talk, it's still worthwhile. It's not all or nothing. And remember, lots of things you saw here work in iOS 17 only. but some do backport backwards 16, 15, 14, and even 13 sometimes, but you very often do have to have that latest version of Xcode. Xcode 15 or later. That's the emit into client attribute saying, yes, copy this new code into older compatible versions too. Anyway, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed the talk, learned something new along the way, and you're ready to improve your Swift code in all sorts of cool ways. If you liked it, hit like, please subscribe. I make lots of other videos like this one. And if you could, leave a comment below saying what your favorite feature shown in this video was. Take care, folks.